Welcome back to the Nerdy Grill and welcome to the first movie review of 2026. And my first movie review of 2026 is a movie or a video game adaptation movie, yes, another one of those, based on one of the biggest psychological horror franchises of all time. It's one that's very well known, a lot of people at least have heard of, if not played or seen, and I'm of course talking about Silent Hill, or in this case I'm talking about the movie Return to Silent Hill, which came out here in the UK on the 23rd of January 2026, and me and my fiancée saw a late night screening of that, and that was our first movie experience of 2026. Now, Return to Silent Hill is literally an adaptation of the original 2001 game Silent Hill 2, which also did get a 2024 remake, Silent Hill 2, which I have on the PS5 and I've played, and I actually really enjoyed it. Now, Silent Hill isn't a franchise that I delve too deeply in, but I am a massive fan, and I know my fiancé does like psychological horrors too, so I thought it would be a pretty interesting movie to watch. And also another reason why it piqued my interest was because I have seen some early screening reviews of the movie, and they were slating the movie really, really badly, and I'm actually going to put a picture up on the screen somewhere down below and show you the current, as of doing this video, Rotten Tomatoes score for Return to Silent Hill, which I believe sits at 15% from critics and only 30% from the audience, showing that this is a movie that actually isn't very well loved. And I've even heard the title, is this the worst movie video game adaptation put to screen? And it's a bit of a weird one. It is a bit of a weird one. It is a bit of a weird movie. I'm going to sort of put this out there now, and I'm going to say that when I finished watching the movie, in terms of the cinema experience that I got, I didn't have a terrible movie experience. And funnily enough, we were in quite a small screen. There was only, I think, maybe about 40 seats max probably in the screening we were seeing. But everybody at the end of the movie was having full-on discussions with each other, all saying, what did you think of that movie? How would you compare that to the game? What did you think? And to be fair, quite a lot of the people, I wasn't really hearing much negativity. I was hearing people saying either, it's all right, it was about average, it's kind of what I expected, could have been a little bit better, but wasn't the worst thing either. But also there was a lot of confusion, a lot of things that people felt weren't explained very well, or there was too much going on, and so it made it a little bit confusing. My main question that I had when I finished watching the movie experience, and I said this to my fiancée at the time, was why was this made? And I think that is the biggest thing for me, is sometimes I can see why video game movies are made, like the Sonic franchise or Detective Pikachu or anything like that. I can see why some are made. But when it came to Silent Hill, or Return to Silent Hill as this movie's known, I was a bit unsure as to why they made this movie per se. Like, look, it is a fairly decent movie, I think. It's nothing groundbreaking. I think some of the acting was a little bit cringy at times. I will say that the effects, they really were hammering home the video game aspect. There was lots of different mediums they were going. There was like first person view at one point where our main character James Sunderland was like holding his phone out, and he was like running through like hotel rooms and through bars, and it looked like it was like a camera view. They had like top down views of him walking through Silent Hill. Some of the villains in this, like there was a gigantic spider creature, and they literally hammed up the CGI on that, so it really looked like almost trying to go back to like the PS1, PS2 era, I think, personally. But yeah, it really did feel like a video game. In some of the dialogue that was used as well, I know there was stuff that was taken directly from the game. I know obviously they were trying to make it both a loose and a direct adaptation of it, and that was clear in some shots, in some of the pacing choices. It was good in some aspects, but obviously really bad in others. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go over my positives and my negatives for the movie, and also give you a brief rundown of the actual plot of the movie. So the overall plot of the movie is we've got this character of James Sunderland who receives a letter from his deceased wife and calls him back to Silent Hill. He goes back to investigate to try and find her. But all through the movie, we learn that James is actually in a little bit of denial. His wife is no longer with him, and he cannot accept this. And so as a result, he starts causing himself a bit of trauma. He starts causing himself a bit of psychological and physical harm in terms of he's then creating this world that is sort of going a bit haywire. He's creating these physical, emotional and psychological monsters that are tormenting him because he refuses to accept the consequences of his actions. Because this whole film, there's multiple themes throughout this film of confronting difficult past, difficult truths. There's themes of guilt in here, and that's done through, both verbal and visual storytelling, which I think, is a little bit confusing if you don't know the Silent Hill franchise, and also isn't like the most obvious thing in the world to start with, but it does become a lot more obvious as things go on. I would say in terms of the music, obviously I believe that the original video game composer was actually in on the music, and the theming and the themes and the sounds that were played throughout the movie were spot on and really, really good, and had that almost eerie feel to it that Silent Hill brings, but also had that sort of sad feeling to it as well when you come to the realizations of what's actually going on. So I thought music-wise it was good. I thought the visuals, for the most part, were pretty good. However, like I said earlier, there was a couple of shots and a couple of moments where it did feel very video gamey, almost too video gamey, and some of the CGI wasn't the best. However, I feel like lately with video game movies, like the Sonic franchise I think does it the best, but also like with the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise that's out on movies as well, I think nowadays in terms of how special effects has come up in the world a little bit and things that we can do, I think that adapting characters from the games and putting them onto the big screen has become a lot easier, and it's become a lot more accurate. So characters like Pyramid Head and stuff like that, who look absolutely gorgeous, by the way, in the movie, wish he was in it a lot more. They look great now. They don't look terrible. Back in the day, like the early 2000s or the 1990s and 80s, when they were doing early video game adaptations, transferring characters over wasn't really done the best because of the time, but things have changed now, so some things can look a lot better. So I enjoyed that. Acting wise, like I said, some bits were a bit cringy, other bits were a bit all over the place. They were trying to ham it up, I think, a little bit for drama, for tension, and for, obviously, they almost tried to make it feel like a video game. It was almost like they were trying to do a proper one-to-one, but I think you shouldn't do that. You need to remember your medium here is a film, not a video game. You are a video game adaptation, but you are a movie at heart, so you need to sort of transfer that over in the right way. But yeah, so like I said, you've got James who goes back to Silent Hill, and then things start going wrong. He notices that the town is abandoned. He notices that there's these creatures everywhere. He notices that whenever he starts to remember his deceased wife, Mary, comes to the realization that she's gone, things start going hectically wrong. He starts getting chased down. He encounters a couple of survivors, like a homeless man. He encounters this guy called Eddie, this girl called Laura, and then starts encountering all these different monsters who are trying to hunt him down, basically almost like trying to wake him up and snap him out of this reality. He learns throughout the story that obviously his wife was a part of this cult who were poisoning her whole life. And there was a point where she was trying to escape, and that was the point where they first met. But obviously, because he bumped into her at the start, she was unable to leave, but they lived this happy life together. Once James comes to the realization of what's going on, he wants to take her away from it, wants to leave because he's had enough. When she realizes she can't or doesn't want to, he leaves her, and that's part of the guilt that he's feeling, the fact that he left her, and then as a result, she got really sick and died, and so he feels partly responsible for that and can't accept her gone, because if he accepts her gone, then he's got to learn that it was partly his fault for not helping her and taking her away from that situation. Eventually, he does come to this acceptance, and they sort of do like an apparent suicide where they drive off the pier near this Riverside Hotel or Lakeside Hotel in Silent Hill, supposedly to drown, but he wakes up, and they sort of go back to how it started of the movie, where he bumped into her and knocked her suitcases over and made her miss her bus to escape. They sort of recreate that, but this time instead of him taking her to Silent Hill, and starting the cycle over again, they almost try to make out that this time he takes her away from the danger and makes the correct choice. So it's kind of good in that aspect. But yeah, I left the theatre just scratching my head thinking like, look, there was some things that were good here, but there was a lot of stuff here where I thought it just feels a bit choppy and messy. And the amount of times he goes through the trauma, goes through, you know, coming back to reality, then going back to Silent Hill, then coming back to reality. I know what they were going for, and that's apparent in like the video games and stuff like that. It was good, but just it felt very choppy. And I think that's the problem with a movie version of a video game, is in the video game you've got a lot more hours to play with. Like the original was about an 8 to 10 hour campaign, whereas then the remake they increased it to like 16 to 18 hours, and they had to try and cram this down into an hour and 50-minute movie. And obviously then that means that some things are rushed, some things don't get explained very well. And I think that's what this movie suffers with a lot, is a lack of explanation. Apart from they try to do it visually, which can work and has worked in the past for some movies, but I think explanations are a little bit more required here, especially for people who are not as familiar with Silent Hill or not as familiar with films that sort of go down this route in the first place. But yeah, so would I say it's an absolutely god-awful movie that deserves like 10% odd on Rotten Tomatoes and deserves like 30% or less on Rotten Tomatoes from audience? I don't think so, if I'm perfectly honest. It definitely wouldn't get like top marks from me, but I'm going to be a bit more fair to it, and I'm going to give it I'm going to give it smack bang in the middle. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Which is, I know, just a little bit above. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10, maybe even a 5.5. I'm going to give it a 5.5, I think, out of 10. I did enjoy it. I did enjoy some aspects, but there were some bits for me that dragged too much, and yeah, it just didn't fully work. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but I wouldn't rate it massively high. But that is going to be my review on Return to Silent Hill. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, please like it by giving it a thumbs up and comment down below your thoughts on Return to Silent Hill. Have you seen it? Let me know in the comments below. And subscribe if you are new. But for now, this is the Nerdy Grill signing off. I hope you've had an amazing day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye for now, everyone.